Hello, here's the fourth of my five little introductory video clips on the problem of evil for you. And today I'd like you to explore one of the real dilemmas that we have philosophically with the question of evil. And that's this, and it particularly relates to the Augustinian view of theodicy. And it was brought up by L Mackie, M-A-C-K-I-E, in his book The Coherence of Theism. He raises the whole question of God's omniscience. Not, notice, God's omnipotence, because that's part of the original formulation of the problem of evil, which goes back to Epicurus and others in Greek philosophy. No, Mackie talks about the omniscience of God, the idea that God is supposed to be able to know absolutely everything that goes on. Let's have a look at the Augustinian idea again. Let's just remind ourselves, what does Augustine say? That God essentially created the best world that he could have created. He could have created a world where everyone does exactly what God wants them to do, and therefore, of course, they would automatically do good. But of course, that good would not result in love. That would not be truly love, because for love you have to have free will. So rather than making them automatons, machines, computers, he gave them genuine free will. And if you're going to give someone genuine free will, you've got the opportunity to do the opposite, to go their own way and reject God. All right, okay. The question, though, if that really is the best of all possible worlds that God could have created, and he had to allow for the fact that human beings might have gone off the rails, which indeed they did, surely, says Mackie, God should have known that, because God is omniscient. Therefore, if God knows everything, he knows that human beings are going to go off the rails and do their own thing. Wouldn't it have been more satisfactory, says Mackie, if God had created a world where human beings did have the possibility of going towards good or going towards evil, but in the end chose to go for good? I mean, you imagine it. You've got two different worlds. You've got a world where mankind has a choice and chooses good, and a world where mankind has a choice and chooses evil, and everything in between, where mankind has a choice and chooses some good and some evil in various proportions. You can think of millions of different worlds that lie in between those two extremes. And Mackie's point is, God should have just made a world where where he gave man a choice, but because he has foreknowledge, because he could see in advance what was going to happen, because he can do anything, remember, and he knows anything, he should have created a world where mankind chose to do good, and that he knew that that would happen and everything would work out fine. End of story. Well, we have to say to Mackie, no, sorry, that just won't wash. And the reason why it won't wash is all to do with the nature of the future and God's foreknowledge. Excuse me, let's have a think about this. I like to talk, when we talk about God's omniscience, about a timeline. And in that timeline, we've got the past, the present, and the future. God, if he is omniscient, must know everything there is to know. So he must know everything that's happened in the past, otherwise he wouldn't be omniscient. God, if he's omniscient, has to know everything there is to know, and he must therefore know everything about the present, because whatever is happening in the present is a thing to be known, and God should know it. And in a sense, God must know everything about the future, because if he knows everything about the present, he should know enough about us to be able to be aware of the sort of choices that we are likely to make. I mean, if, for example, let's take Holly. Right, Holly, I don't know what you had for breakfast this morning, but let's imagine that you had a choice of Cocoa Pops or cornflakes. And let's imagine that as you came down to breakfast, you had the choice of Cocoa Pops or cornflakes, but you absolutely detest Cocoa Pops and you love cornflakes. Now, if God knows that about you at the moment, he knows that your future choice is very, very likely to be cornflakes rather than Cocoa Pops, yes? So he would know the choice that you were going to make in the future. The problem here, folks, is that because it's in the future, it is not a thing to be known. This is key. It's what I call not a thing to be known. The past can be known because it's happened. The present can be known because it is happening. But the future hasn't happened yet. So The thing that we can hold God responsible for, if he is omniscient, is knowing everything that is there to be known. If it's an X, if it's a thing to be known. But if it's not happened yet, it is not a thing to be known. The only thing he can do is what you do, which is predict from all the knowledge that is to be known what someone might do in the future. So apply that to the whole business of good and evil. If God created a world, as we believe he did according to the Augustinian theodicy, where mankind has a choice, where he can choose good or choose evil, God would not have known what mankind was going to choose, because it is not a thing to be known. If you are to have genuine free will, then God must not know what you're going to do with it, because free will has to be something which is totally free, totally up to you. I mean, if God knew, Holly, that you were going to choose Rice Krispies rather than Cocoa Pops, if he absolutely knew that for certain, not just based on your current knowledge, but because that's in fact what you did choose, then it wouldn't have been a genuine choice, because God knew in advance that that's what you were going to choose. God can only know something if it is genuinely a thing to be known. And whether mankind chooses good or evil is not a thing to be known, and therefore God can't be aware of it. So God cannot be held responsible for the evil that mankind chooses to do. Now I want you to go and do a little bit of work based on this and Mackie's basic premise, and look at the nature of the omniscience of God and whether that precludes him from knowing and therefore being responsible for what happens in the future in the choices of evil, and indeed whether that precludes him from stepping in at any point. Because I'd like you to explore a little bit today about whether we can hold God responsible for not stepping in at the point where evil seems to take place in the world. What kind of world would it be, I want you to ask yourself, if God stepped in every second when he could see something evil about to take place? Would we have laws of nature as we understand them? Would it make a mockery of the world as it is? What kind of things can we genuinely expect God to do if he's omniscient and omnipotent? And I think that might alter the expectations of the Judeo-Christian God when it comes to the type of world that he could have set up and indeed did. Have fun doing that. I think it's a really interesting exercise, and I'll be back for my last video next time.